This is Adarsh Anand on the other side. Thank you for being present. Today, we are here at the program organized by Hindustan Republican Global. Hindustan Republican is a global movement aimed at preservation of the heritage of the Krantikaris and the IN, along with bringing and promoting retired army personnels into public leadership opportunities inclusive of political roles. Historically, we all know that Hindustan Republican Association was founded by Krantikari Pandit Ram Prasad Bismil and operationalized by Sachendra Nath Sanyal at Varanasi. We have with us the guest of today's program, that is uh, Major General Gagandeep Bakshi, popularly known as Major General G.D. Bakshi, who will enlighten us about the combat performance of the IN. He will evaluate the structure and military performance of the Indian National Army in the World War II and its significant impact on the freedom struggle. Let me introduce our guest. Well, there is way too much less of a probability that some of from our audience not knowing him. But even if some don't, his voice can surely make them remember. Major Gagandeep Bakshi or G.D. Bakshi, born on 1950, is a retired Indian Army officer. He comes from a military family and his elder brother, Captain S.R. Bakshi, sacrificed his life for the nation in the 1965 war. The road in Jabalpur is named after his brother, Captain S.R. Bakshi. Major General G.D. Bakshi is from Jammu and Kashmir Rifles. He was awarded the Vishist Seva Medal for commanding a battalion in the Kargil War. Later, he was awarded the Sena Medal for distinguished service in commanding a battalion during counter-insurgency drives. He subsequently commanded the Romeo Force that was a part of elite Rashtriya Rifles during intensive counter-insurgency operations in the Rajouri Poonch districts of Jammu and Kashmir and succeeded in suppressing the indigenous armed movement in the area. He has served 2 tenures as the Directorate General of Military Operations and was the first BJS at High Quarters Northern Command, India, where he dealt with information warfare and psychological operations too. He is also a prolific writer on matters military and non-military and has published around 45 books and over 400 papers in many prestigious research journals. Welcome, sir. Namaste and welcome, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank
Hope
you.
we will have a good talk today.
Thank you.
Over to you.
So can I?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
You can take them.
First of all, I am deeply gratified to come to a historic organization like the Hindustan Republican Army. You've just given the history of that army. This was the army that had been raised just before the First World War to strive for India's independence. And even their plan was quite like what was subsequently followed in the Second World War by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and the Azad Hind Fauj, Indian National Army, by coming via Burma. They wanted to invade British India from the east and capture it from that side. The first attempt was to be made by the Hindustan Republican Army. I mean, they had, made all those plans. They had purchased weapons. They had, liaised with the Germans, etc., if I now remember correctly, and they were to try and attempt an invasion of British India from the east. Unfortunately, the Ghadar uh, army was very badly infiltrated by British MI5 agents, the British intelligence agents, and the whole operation was compromised. It could not take off the ground. Most of these arms shipments were captured, etc. And they could not even strike the first blow before it was all over. Uh, the only person, very few of them managed to escape. And, Rash Bihari Bose is one person who was part of this plan, part of the Ghadar movement. and the uprising that they had done. He'd done a lot of brave actions himself. And then he had managed to escape to Japan. And frankly, he laid the key, he laid the foundation for the subsequent creation of the Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army. Now, I'd like to go into a bit of history as to how this army was formed. We are all aware of how Netaji, had cleared the ICS exam of the Heaven Born. He had refused to serve the British. He had come fourth in the merit list, or the merit list that is drawn up for the very prestigious ICS exam, which is now the equivalent to the IAS, IFS exam that we have. He had cleared it, refused to join, and then came and joined the Congress party. And Chitranjan, under Chitranjan Das, he took active part in political struggle in India itself. In Kolkata was his home base. He had become the mayor of Kolkata. He was imprisoned repeatedly by the British. Ultimately, he became the president. He won the election and became the president of the Indian National Congress. And then he very clearly, that is the time, 1939, the Second World War was about to start. And he had very clearly told Mahatma Gandhi, Ki Gandhi ji, there is no way that the British will go by peaceful means. Our non-violent agitation, however noble, our fasting and our charkha weaving, it will not make the British go. They will not go without a fight. We will have to fight for our freedom. We'll have to fight and throw them out. You see, that was the plan of the that was what he had suggested to Gandhi, and he was absolutely 100% right in his vision, in his strategic thinking. He was a great strategist par excellence. Unfortunately, Gandhiji did not agree with him. Despite Gandhiji's wishes, he stood up for president a second time. And despite Gandhiji's not wanting it, he won the elections. The only man who could have stood up to Gandhi in the Congress party then, only and only Subhash Chandra Bose could have done it. He did it. For his pains, he was thrown out of the Indian National Congress. He could not, Gandhi made sure that he could not function as the president. He was forced to resign. And then we all know how he escaped across India, dressed as a Maulvi, then across Pakistan, into Afghanistan, now as a deaf and dumb Pathan, mute Pathan. He reached Kabul. He tried to contact the German embassy. They wouldn't take him. He tried to contact the Russian embassy. They wouldn't entertain him. Finally, the Italian embassy agreed, and they gave him a new identity, Count Orlando. And so, with a small little beard and this thing, he changed disguise a third time, and he traveled across the Trans-Siberian Railway in the via Uzbekistan, via Tashkent. I have been on that route, Tashkent and Samarkand and Bukhara, etc. He traveled all the way to Russia. He reached Moscow. He tried to contact Stalin. He tried to contact the top echelons of the Soviet government, but they would not entertain him. They refused to meet him, but they allowed him to pass on to Europe. He went to Italy, he went Mussolini, and then finally, ultimately, he landed up in Nazi Germany. And there he met Hitler, Adolf Hitler himself, and made a very strong impression on him. He was deeply impressed by the personality of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and his absolute transparent sincerity and fiery nature, revolutionary nature to overthrow the British Empire and to make India free. Unfortunately, by the time he had reached Germany, the tide of war was already changing. Uh, uh, Germany invaded, Russia even while he was in Berlin. And he went and told Hitler that it was a great, tragic strategic mistake, error. He should not have done it. But I mean, the German armies were then blitzkrieging into the Soviet Union. And the fact of the matter is that he had raised an industrial legion, a brigade strong force of from the prisoners of war of the Indian Army, British Indian Army captured in North Africa and elsewhere. They had raised an industrial legion. He had trained with the legion. He had learned the art of war. He had learned the strategy, tactics from the Germans. You see, so he was no novice. He had been part of the NCC also when the equivalent of the NCC, the University Cadet Corps. He had done his bit of basic military training with the British itself in Kolkata. And then he had formed a kind of a guard, a Praetorian Congress guard in white uniforms and jackboots, who used to give guards of honor to the Congress leaders. Uh, so he was always militarily inclined, right? Even though he lacked formal military training, he has turned out to be one of the best military strategists like Mao Zedong, like Wu Guian Gaya, who were not trained in any military academy but were excellent at fighting. So he, ultimately, when he found that Germany was losing the war, they couldn't reach the Suez Canal. They were fighting in North Africa very well. Rommel was doing very well. But then, because of sheer lack of numbers, he was beaten. And then he realized that if he stayed on in Germany, he would not achieve very much. By that time, Rash Bihari Bose had been working with the Japanese, and the Japanese, there was Major Fujiwara, who later became Lieutenant General Fujiwara of the Japanese intelligence, military intelligence, and he had raised the Azad Hind Fauj from the prisoners of war taken by the Japanese army. Major General Mohan Singh, then Captain Mohan Singh of the Punjab Regiment, was selected as the first head of the Azad Hind Fauj, the Indian National Army. And it was raised to a strength of about 25, 30,000. But you see, Major Fujiwara was just a major. It's an amazing thing that he had so much conviction, he was so much trust the Japanese higher command placed on just a junior level officer. But the fact is that, in the senior Japanese generals, they had beaten the British in Malaya, they had beaten the British in Singapore, they had beaten the hell out of the British in Burma, they had beaten the Chinese black and blue in China. They were very proud, and that time they were very, very, I would say, arrogant. They didn't consider anybody their equal, etc. And they had contempt for anybody who lays down his arms. In the Japanese code of the Bushido, either you win or you die. And if you lose the battle, you are supposed to commit ceremonial harakiri, suicide, by disemboweling yourself with a Japanese sword. Very painful death. But they then atone for their failure to defend their country by that kind of a death. So they were not happy with prisoners of war who had, they felt, now change side or whatever. But that is not strategic thinking. Fujiwara, as a major, thought strategically. The problem of the first INA was the low level of contact with the Japanese government and the Japanese army, right? So then a colonel was brought in. Quite obviously, a colonel will be overruled by any brigadier, any general. They won't sort of listen to a colonel who was in charge of the INA bureau. And this led to a lot of friction between the Japanese and the INA. And ultimately, the Japanese got very upset, because even the INA was very, very apprehensive that they would not be used as coolie labor, as quisling, as this kind of a thing, that they wanted to really fight for their independence, do it independently on their own. And the Japanese didn't think very much of them. So there was this friction, and ultimately, Mohan Singh was arrested and removed. And there was a big purge of the INA. Its strength was reduced. Rash Bihari Bose was given direct charge. A lot of officers in the Azad Hind Fauj itself, they did not trust Rash Bihari very much. So Rash Bihari told the Japanese that if you want the INA to work, and it can do a hell of a lot of good work, it could really free India, you must get Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from Germany. So the Japanese ambassador in Germany was given the task, and we all know how Netaji then came in a German submarine all the way from Germany around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. And they came up to Madagascar, where a Japanese submarine, I-29 submarine, this was U-282, that was Japanese I-29. They both came together, they emerged. It was a full scale storm, sea state 5, 40 to 50 feet high waves. And how Netaji crossed in that storm in a three-man rubber boat, reached the Japanese submarine. I mean, it is a great saga of courage. The German captain told him, "Don't go, you won't make it. I advise you to go back." And Netaji had turned and told the Japanese captain, "Captain, I did not come all this way to go back." So, anytime there was a choice between life and death, like a good samurai, like a warrior, Netaji always chose death. He embraced death and he lived to fight more. So he reached the Japanese submarine. It was the emperor's birthday. It was a big celebration. They then took him to Haiphong, and then from there he flew to Tokyo. In Tokyo, he insisted on meeting the top Japanese leadership. He had functioned in Berlin as a plenipotentiary of India, as an ambassador virtually or a government in exile. And he treated himself with that deference and with that dignity and aplomb. And the Germans gave him full, they were impressed by his personality. And they gave him full respect, which they don't do for people of colored origin. At least the Nazi Germany was quite racist, in fact. But so he said, "I want to meet the Minister of War. I want to meet the Foreign Minister, the Army Chief, the Navy Chief, the Marines commander, etc. And then I want to meet the Prime Minister." So he met the Foreign Minister. He met the Japanese, gave him a lot more respect and regards, even more than the Germans. That is the difference between INA 1 and INA 2. INA 1, their contact level was majors, colonels with the Japanese army. INA 2, when Netaji took charge, the contact was with Prime Minister Tojo. He met Tojo himself, who was greatly impressed by the personality of Netaji, his commitment to the cause of the freedom of his country. Right? That is what Netaji was, and that is the seed change that he brought about in the INA. Now he had already gained a lot of military experience in Berlin, and based upon that, he reorganized the INA from a force of just 25 to 30,000. He raised it to 60,000. 45,000 were the prisoners of war from in the captivity of the Japanese. Indian prisoners of war. He took them in. 20,000 he recruited locally from the indentured Indian labor in Malaya, Singapore, etc. He recruited local Indians from the diaspora. The Indian diaspora played a very great role in the freedom of India, more than is recognized or even learnt of. So, with the new expanded INA of 60,000, he reorganized it into 3 divisions. The basic fighting orchestra or organ in all the armed forces of the world till today is the division. It is a combined armed force of all arms, about 15 to 20,000 strong, depending on what kind of a division it is. But an infantry division is about 15,000 strong. It has its own artillery, it has its own logistic support elements, own engineers, own tank regiment. It's a full fighting orchestra which can fight on its own, and it had been there from the times of Napoleon. Before that, the INA was organized in brigade-sized force at best, and they were supposed to be guerrilla detachments who would go and fight behind enemy lines, who would encourage or motivate British Indian Army units to surrender, to come over to the Japanese side, etc., to do irregular warfare. They were not even really trained for regular warfare. It is Netaji who changed all that and made it into a regular fighting force. And he insisted with the Japanese that the first troops on Indian soil will have to be Indians. We will lead the assault. The problem was that when the Japanese initially were not very keen to invade India because it was not part of their plans. So the Japanese, decided to, they were postponing the invasion of India. Had the Japanese gone in 1943, 42, the do or die movement had been launched by Mahatma Gandhi, Quit India movement as it is called, which had failed, which had been crushed. But there were a lot of mobilization within India, you know, because of that. And the Japanese had just thrown the British out of Burma. And had they followed through, and there were some Japanese junior officers who wanted to follow through and go for India also, but they were not allowed because they said it will be overstretch and all that. So the British army, which was reeling, had the Japanese attacked in 43, the British, it would have gone like a knife through butter. But the British army was reeling. Then they gave more than a year. They finally attacked in 1944 by the prodding of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. They attacked Imphal and Kohima. The toughest battles of the Second World War were Imphal and Kohima. 19-20 ka farak tha. It was touch and go which side would win. Unfortunately, by that time, the Americans had intervened on the side of the British. The American Air Force, the American Navy, had thrown its weight into the battle. The Japanese had lost air superiority. They were fighting a grim battle for the control of the seas, for the control of the islands, and the Americans were now hopping from island to island doing those campaigns. So the whole situation had changed. And when the Japanese attacked, it was a case of too little, too late. But do you know that the British were so scared of a Japanese invasion, and they thought the invasion would come through now Bangladesh, what is now Bangladesh. So they had burnt in 43 all the wooden riverine boats because they were scared that the Japanese would use these boats to transport their armed forces up the rivers and into invade Calcutta proper, right? So they burnt the boats, and that caused the famine of 1943, the Great Bengal famine, in which about 3.5 million Indians died. And while the Indians were dying, Churchill was causing rice and food exports to be done to Europe from India, even as 3.5 million Indians died. So much for the good the colonial empire is supposed to have done to India. They caused 7 bloody famines in India. And in each of them, about 3 million Indians died. So 21 million Indians were killed by the British by their engineered famines. Anyway, to come back to the battle, the first INA, when they went in the battles of Imphal and Kohima, the Japanese said, "Don't worry, we will do the heavy lifting. You support us by recce, reconnaissance, surveillance. You support us by subversion, etc., small unit raids, because your officers have not fought above the company level. They lack the experience of senior command beyond battalion, brigade, division. So we are not sure how well the INA will perform. So we will not give the INA the main role. You will be in combat support role. You will be in the support role in terms of raids behind enemy lines and this thing. Even then, Netaji insisted. And in the few places the INA did, Kaladan, Battle of Kaladan, the INA did very well. And the INA contributed very greatly to this whole Imphal Kohima campaign. The biggest mistake the Japanese made was they should have gone for the railhead of Dimapur. Had that been captured, the whole war would have been over, and the Japanese INA forces would have won and gone into India proper. And that would have been the end of the empire. Unfortunately, because of air power, the Japanese lost the battles of Imphal and Kohima, and the INA suffered very greatly, very, very greatly in that retreat because the monsoon started, leeches in that forest, snakes in that forest, and no food, no rations. Their entire supply lines were washed out by the monsoons. They had not planned for the operation would extend into the monsoons, which, because of superior air power of the allies it had, the first INA division suffered very greatly, very, very painfully. It was extremely painful, their suffering, but it is a miracle that they fought shoulder to shoulder with the Japanese. Now, the second INA division was moved into Burma, and along with it, Netaji went forward himself from Singapore. He made his headquarters in Rangoon, and then he wanted to move even more forward to be closer to the battle lines. The first INA division, they were very badly mauled, but the new fresh divisions were brought in. Netaji now insisted, please give us independent sectors. We will fight our own battles. We will not fight as subordinate units of the Japanese. We will have our own independent command. We are fighting as an allied army. We are not a subordinate army to the Japanese army. So please give us our own independent sector. We'll show you what we can do. Now, the Japanese were in a very chastised mood. They had seen the Indians fight very well, and they now gave them separate sector. The Irrawaddy sector was given to the INA, and the Mount Popa hill, just which is behind the Irrawaddy river, was given to the INA. And Brigadier Dhillon was commanding the brigade on the Irrawaddy river front. When Field Marshal Slim wanted to launch his counterattack, he felt this would be the weakest spot in the Japanese defense line because the INA was manning. They put lots of leaflets, surrender, surrender. Pehle to tum ghar aa rahe the, now you are going more and more and more away from home. Why are you fighting this war that you just cannot win? Come over and we will forgive, forget, vagara, vagara. These leaflets were dropped. That is the time Brigadier Dhillon, uh, Gursharan Dhillon, Brigadier Dhillon was in charge, and he put up such a fierce fight. The first Allied attack on the Irrawaddy river front was beaten back with heavy losses. Second attack was beaten back. Third attack was beaten back. The British were astonished. They thought the INA would surrender in droves. You forget surrendering. They fought tooth and nail to touch and go. Then the British brought in their bombers, they brought in their tanks, which fired from across the Irrawaddy, and then they launched their fourth and final assault, which was too much for the INA to withstand because they had run out of ammunition by then. They had no artillery support. They were just using their mortars and machine guns, and out of so many machine guns, they had just a few machine guns left. So they had cannibalized and were doing, despite all the difficulties, they put up such a fierce resistance that the Allies were shaken. And they then decided not to underestimate the INA anymore. They have to get further shocks. The INA now fell back onto the Mount Popa redoubt. Mount Popa is cliffs, straight cliffs, and there are monasteries on top where they headquarter. The INA division now took up defenses. General Dhillon also fell back there. Colonel Prem Sehgal with his brigade was there, and Major General Shah Nawaz Khan of the second division of the INA was in charge of this battle. The British launched repeated attacks to try and take Mount Popa. They just failed. Then they brought in a tank brigade to assault. They had no anti-tank weapons, but they just, with their mines, they lay down between the tank tracks and blew them up, attacked them with Molotov cocktails. They beat back infantry of the INA, beat back the attacks of the British Armored Brigade, British infantry divisions. You see, it is one of the most heroic battles in the history of any army, the Battle of Mount Popa. So if you want to know the combat performance of the INA, we just have to take a look at the Battle of Irrawaddy and the Battle of Mount Popa. And finally, when the British could not capture Mount Popa, they decided to go around it. They decided to go around it, bypass it, and go further. And they got behind them. So when their lines of communication were cut, supplies were cut, they also had no option but then to retreat from there and join the Japanese in their retreat across Burma. A retreat is the most difficult operation. To maintain morale in a retreat is extremely difficult. But Netaji himself retreated with his troops. The Rani of Jhansi regiment, when he saw, he himself made sure they came back. He marched on foot with the retreating INA, and they held off despite their best efforts. The the British forces, the Australians, etc., Indian divisions could not entrap the INA as it retreated across Burma and into Thailand and then back towards Singapore. By that time, the Americans exploded the bombs, nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the Japanese now had no option but to surrender because that was the time they got attacked in Manchuria by the Soviet army, which had a sudden breakthrough. The Japanese were at the end of their tether, and unfortunately, they knew that they would just get their people killed by nuclear bombs if they fought on, so they surrendered. Netaji refused to surrender. The Japanese intelligence, the Kampetai, made a plan to take him in a bomber and take him to Manchuria, where he would contact the Russian forces, the Soviet army, and continue the battle. A deception plan was made that he was going to Formosa, Taiwan, and his aircraft crashed there and he died on 18th August. But the fact is, he reached Manchuria, he met up with the Russian forces, he surrendered to the Russian forces. He had gone with 3 bags of suitcases of gold and this and that, which had been given by the Indian people of the diaspora to fight, raise new armies, and keep fighting. Never surrender. Keep fighting. That is the spirit of the INA and of Netaji Subhash Bose himself. Out of 60,000, 26,000 Indian soldiers of the INA laid down their lives. This is 44% of the force that died fighting. The pity is that till date there is no war memorial in the whole of India to this 26,000 war heroes of the INA. I have been requesting the government, we had been requesting them for a statue of Netaji on Rajpath, now Kartavya Path, which has now come about. It took us 12 years to get that. We are now requesting the government to kindly build a war memorial for the braves of the INA. Build it under the India Gate where the Amar Jawan Jyoti used to be. I would request the Hindustan Republican Army to please take it up as a military campaign to go to every city and town of this country and ask for a war memorial to be constructed for the 26,000 martyrs of the INA. एक पत्थर नहीं है इस पूरे देश में जहां उनका नाम लिखा हो. They are the people because of whom you and I are free. Can't the nation do this much? Netaji had constructed a war memorial in Singapore to the INA. When Nehruji and Mountbatten went there, the people of Indian origin asked Nehruji to visit to pay his floral wreath at the war memorial of the INA. Mountbatten forbade Nehru from going there, and Nehru obeyed. Mountbatten sent army engineers and blew up that war memorial. But do you know that in 1995, the people of Indian origin in Singapore paid from their pockets, apni jeb se paisa diye, to rebuild a war memorial to the INA in the shape of a history book, which is still there in the Singapore. You can go and see it. But it
Yeah,
is.
I assure you that we will take up this campaign for sure about the INA War Memorial. I assure you that our organization will do so.
You must do this because this is the last duty we owe to the INA. Let's just not talk about the INA. Let us do something concrete. Let us ensure, and it is the duty of the Hindustan Republican Army, which is in spirit. The INA was a continuation of the Hindustan Republican Army, that you must ensure that we get back this war memorial for our war heroes. It is tras, tarpan, you do for your forefathers. And unless we do that, their spirits, unki atma bhatakti rahegi. So we might as well do it. With that, I will conclude. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind.
Jain, sir,
Thank
Jain.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for enlightening us. And I assure you that we will be taking up the campaign for sure. And so now, first of all, thank you so much for enlightening us. And now it's the turn of the audience. I will request our audience to ask questions if they have any. You can type your questions in the chat box, or you can directly ask to GD Bakshi sir by turning your videos on. So till then, I have a question for you, Bakshi sir. So
Yeah.
British caused famines, right? So millions dead, and should there not be a genocide memorial? Could Victoria Memorial, that memorial that we see in Kolkata, can be converted to a British genocide memorial? No, we all
I
know
would
about
call it the Holocaust Memorial. You
Holocaust.
see, the Jewish Holocaust, how many Jews are supposed to have died? 6 million. And the whole world, shakes its head in horror. And they have a Holocaust museum. They have a Holocaust memorial. So we could have a Holocaust memorial for the 21 million Indians who died in the man-made famines created by the British Empire. But before that, we need the war memorial for 26,000 soldiers, martyrs of the INA. Let's take it step by step. Don't ask for too many things that will distract attention. First, go in for this, then we will go for this
Sure,
Holocaust memorial.
Memorial. It
But
should
that's a
be.
good point. That's a
Thank you.
good point.
And now we have a question from someone from Pakistan. So Khan Idris ji has written down his question. Hi sir, it's always a pleasure to listen to you. I am from Pakistan, a graduate of National Defense University. Recently, I read a book by Christine Fair titled Fighting to the End. The Pakistan Army way of war. The central point in the book is around the fact that even if Pakistan Army inherently understand that it can't withstand the Indian Army in the theater of warfare, it would still stir anti-Indian jingoistic mantra within the hearts and minds of Pakistani populace to keep their power and exploitation intact. Your thoughts on this perspective, sir? So he's talking
Look,
about Christine Fair.
look, I understand from the question that you are from the Pakistan Army or former Pakistan Army. So I'm not sure what your rank and designation was. But then you see, it's good. Yes, any army is tasked to fight to the last man, last round. We did it at Mount Popa, the Indian National Army. Indian National Army has done it on many occasions, and the Pakistan Army is a professional army. And but the fact is, then you have to live by your words. I'm afraid that is not what the Pakistan Army did in Bangladesh. In 13 days, in 13 days, we were told there would be a 1,000 years war, etc. But in 13 days, the Pakistan army had surrendered, and there were 93,000 Pakistani prisoners of war. So it is an excellent ideal to live up to, and any army should live up to that ideal. But then, there is we must, words and deeds must match. I mean, that's all that I can tell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for answering the question, sir. And another question from my side. So, sir, how valid is the August 15th date as Independence Day? Should it be October 21st? October 21st is the, as the declaration of Independence Day. We can keep, what is your view? So,
I understand. I
should
understand.
it
I
be
understand.
15th August or
That's a good
21st?
question. That's a very good question. 15th August as an Independence Day is bogus. We did not get our independence on 15th of August. We got we got dominion status, okay? We got dominion status. Pakistan also got dominion status one day earlier, 14th August. But they chose a Pakistani as their first governor general. I feel humiliated that India chose Lord Louis Mountbatten. Nehru chose Lord Louis Mountbatten as the first Governor General of independent India. You mean to say there was not one Indian qualified to, if he could become the Prime Minister without having any prior experience, so could somebody have become the Governor General. Rajaji was made Governor General about a year and a half down the line. Why the first Governor General of Dominion of India, not independent India? Dominion of India should have been Lord Louis Mountbatten. That itself showed that it was not independent. The Union Jack was not brought down. Only the tricolor was sent up. Had it been real independence, the Union Jack would have been ceremonially brought down and the tricolor sent up. But it was not. Because your Governor General said, no, you can't do it. You are technically a dominion, tum independent thodi na ho. So it is a lie to call it an Independence Day. Let's get that right. The second factor is that, you see, the Americans, which is their Independence Day, 4th of July. Did the British leave on that day? No. The Declaration of Independence was made on the 4th of July by George Washington. And that is the day the Americans count as their Independence Day. So our Declaration of Independence was done on 21st of October by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from Singapore. And he had declared the formation of an independent government of India in exile. Hakumate Arzi Azad Hind in exile, which was recognized by 9 countries of the world, of course, including the Axis powers of Germany, Japan, Italy included, and their allies and sub-partners. It also included the Soviet Union, which was on the Allied side. So we had received recognition from 9 major countries of the world. That was true Indian independence. Day it had been declared, a government in exile had been formed, an army in exile had been formed, an air force in exile was being formed, a national bank had been formed, right? Notes, currency had been issued, and they had declared war against Great Britain and America. That is the real day of Indian independence. That is the time the Indian national flag was unfurled there, and the national anthem Jana Gana Mana was made by the INA. It is the band tune is taken from the INA tune. So the fact of the matter is that your true Independence Day is 21st of October, 1943. That is your real Independence Day. 15th August was a hoax, a sham.
Thank you, sir.
Sir,
I will request the audience if anyone has any questions to ask.
yes. Hello.
Yeah,
I
I
have
have something to say.
Uh,
This is Dr. Sushmit Kumar.
Yes, Sushmit ji, we will come back to you for sure.
Okay.
Let Shashank ask. Ji Shashank.
Hello, Namaste, Major sir. I have some questions to you. So, as you have prescribed earlier, so who was the first PM? So, who should we consider the first PM of India? Whether it's Nehru or Bose? Then there is second question that I have is like Nehru did a lot of blunders, and that which is related to Kashmir or Coco Island, or also related to the Tibet. And then I have further observed like there was something missing within the Indian grand narrative, and he was also against the practices of our nation. That was Indian grand narrative. Also, he claimed Sengol as one of the Sengol as the instrument of the compared it to the stick. So, what are your thoughts on this, on these three things?
No, you see, quite obviously that if 23rd October is taken as our Independence Day, quite obviously, Netaji, I would say he was the first president of free India. You know, he was the first president. He was also the defense minister, minister of war. You see, and I totally agree with you that our Independence Day should be considered as 21st October. Netaji is the first president of free India in exile, you know, and that should be on our history books, our statuette books. Our history books need to be changed, and we should Indianize ourselves. The British, were forced to flee in 47 due to the INA. But they did not hand over power to the INA. They handed over power to a Anglophile elite led by the Eton-educated Nehru, who ran the India as if it was the British Raj, a continuation of the Raj, no change, inherited the structures of powers, IAS, IPS, armed forces from the British Raj, and continued with the same. In the Indian Constitution, for example, is virtually a repeat of the British India Act of 1935. Please compare the two acts. And in the directive principles of state for we the people of India, etc., have resolved to give ourselves social justice. Liberty, fraternity, equality comes after social justice. And do you know that the British had a concept called imperial justice? They said Indians are not fit to rule themselves because they are so divided on lines of caste, creed, religion, language, race, ethnicity. Only a foreigner can rule India fairly, impartially. So that imperial concept was very deftly changed to social justice and made the cornerstone of your constitution. We are still fighting over caste and creed. Your pygmy politicians have not been able to go beyond caste. They have made caste more relevant than ever when it should have died out because of industrialization, urbanization. Can you ask in a metro the chap sitting next to you, what is your caste? He should slap you in the face. It is nonsense. It may have been okay some 1,000 years back in the agricultural era. And even then, the Indian system was not based on birth. It was fluid. There was mobility of jobs in the Varna Jati system. It is the British who made Varna and Jati frozen into caste. Herbert Hope Risley did the social engineering to make permanent fault caste lines so that India would never get together to fight and throw out the British. But it is because of people like Subhash Chandra Bose. It is because of people like Chandrasekhar Azad, Sardar Bhagat Singh, Shahid Bhagat Singh, etc. Butkeshwar Dutt and all that, who fought against caste, who fought against creed. Swami Dayanand fought against caste and creed. The Buddha fought against caste and creed, and Ambedkar wanted caste to be eradicated and finished. It should have been finished many decades back. We are continuing. Any affirmative action should be based on economic criteria. If you are poor, the government will help you. My caste was this, and therefore for the next 10,000 years, I must get reservation in academic institutions, reservations in jobs, etc., etc., etc. Promotion also, I want reservation. I don't want to work. I think this has gone on long enough. Ambedkar had thought of 10 years. Now we are 75 years, and the way it is going, the way the Congress wants to have caste-based census, they would like it to continue for 10,000 years. I mean, this is creating sub-identities which militate against a national identity.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And Sushmit ji has something to say.
Yeah.
So let me tell you that Sushmit ji has done a lot of research about Netaji as well. So you both can have a nice talk.
Thank you.
Yeah. Whatever Major General Bakshi has said, I have everything in my book. I wrote a book re-evaluating Gandhi, how he delayed independence and mainstreamed radical Islam. It is more than 500 pages long book. It is well researched. It has more than 787 citations. In India, I was in Indian Administrative Service, IAS. I resigned and came to US for PhD. I am in US for last 35 years. I have a PhD in engineering. I work in software, but I have written books in economics, history, international affairs. Most probably you know Raghuram Rajan, another economist. I have forced those people out from the top economic positions. For last 5 years, they are not there. As a RBI chairman and chief economic advisor and RBI governor and Niti Aayog chief. because of me, because I proved that they were harming the Indian economy by implementing the US economic policy. I have written a book, India is a country, not a company, how US imported economists misled and mismanaged the Indian economy. It has 110 charts and tables to analyze the global economy.
Sushmit ji, if you can please ask your question. Actually, we are running out of time.
Yeah. So one thing we haven't dealt into, that Gandhiji never wanted independence for India. When none of his movement was for independence. The much touted 1942 Quit India movement was not for independence. If you go into detail, if you dig into the declassified British papers, when the Second World War started, at that time, the Viceroy asked Gandhiji to meet him. After 3 days of the start of the Second World War, Gandhiji went to the Viceroy house, right now the President house, or the Rashtrapati Bhavan. He met there. The then Viceroy, he started crying before the Viceroy, thinking that Hitler will destroy the important building at London. It is there in the Gandhiji's weekly magazine. He didn't start any movement against the British till 1942 Quit India movement, because till that movement he was of the opinion that Britain will win the World War II. But in 42 he realized that Japan and Germany will win the war. So if you see, it is there in the declassified paper, British government, that original draft of the British, the Gandhiji in handwritten 1942 Quit India original draft of the Gandhiji handwritten paper. It is completely pro-Japan. As per Gandhiji, he was going to hand over, after Britain would have left, he was going to hand over entire India to Japan, to give Japan entire control, civilian control of the Japan, and also to provide Japan military bases in India, as well as to provide foreign troop movement in India, that is to Germany and Italian fascist forces. But then during the CWC, so how it happened, it came into light after the CWC, Congress Working Committee discussion. British Raj Police raided the AICC office and seized the papers. And along the paper, they seized the Gandhiji's handwritten draft.
Okay, Sushmit, if you can complete the question, and then we can move on.
We do not know all these because of the 65 years of the Nehru-Gandhi family rule in India, and they wrote our history. So we are reading completely corrupted history of Indian freedom movement. We obtained because of our INA, because as you have also, Maj.Gen G.D. Bakshi has written, we got independence because of major threat of the major threat of the coup within the army in December 1945. That's why they transferred the power to the Congress party, not because of Gandhi or the Congress.
Okay.
No, I absolutely agree with the learned professor. I would be happy to meet you whenever you come to India.
Yeah, I met once you. I was one of the panelists in the Sudarshan TV.
Oh, I see.
I met once.
Okay. But जब भी आप आते हैं, please मिलिए. I'm very happy that you have done so much work on Netaji and such well researched. You cited the number of references. You see, when I did my PhD, my guide, when I showed him the first draft, he first had a look at the references. He said, how many references? I said about 75. He threw it away. That's not how you get a PhD. So I ultimately got my PhD, and I'm very happy that you have done extensive research. I've done 3 books on Netaji. Two are on the military aspects of Netaji. There is one book called Bose or Gandhi,
Yeah,
Who
I
Made
have the
India
book.
Free. You
I
have
have
the
the
book. I
yeah,
have cited in that the transfer of power archives. I
yeah,
did not just
volume six,
cite them. I
volume six.
photocopied them and I put the original pages there.
Yeah,
I have put the original pages there. Anybody who has eyes can read and see that the British left only and only because of INA and the pressure they had created in the British armed forces. The British were dead scared that a revolt, a mutiny like 1857, worse than 1857, was coming, because then there were 25 lakh combat hardened Indian soldiers in uniform. There were only 40,000 Goras.
yeah.
Okay. So even if they had patthar bhi mare hote, to ye bhag jate. So they knew
Anybody
the
can
writing
buy
on the
that book.
wall.
Anybody
And
can
then
buy
there
that
was
transfer of power book at Amazon and see that.
G. So I'll be grateful if people can read that, and I'd be happy to meet with you, because we can then work together to educate the people and to change our history.
Yeah.
Our history is still, Bipin Chandra Pal wrote 620-page book on the history of the Indian freedom struggle.
Mm.
You know, and how many pages he gives to Netaji and the INA? 1.5. So we have to change and that is the basic textbook of any officer passing the IAS exam. You can't pass your IAS exam unless you read Bipin Chandra on Indian history,
Yeah.
and Romilla Thapad on ancient Indian history. ये British चमचे जो यहाँ छोड़ गए हैं, they are doing a lot of damage still. We have to rescue our history from the clutches of the colonial coolies. वो चले गए, अपने वो चमचे छोड़ गए हैं यहाँ पे. So
अब
then a lot of historical work has to be done.
British government का
I'm afraid,
classified पढ़ी है.
unfortunately, the work is not of academic quality. So when I meet people like you, I think you are needed. A lot of good work is being done by Mr. Rajiv Malhotra of the Infinity Foundation in the United States. He is doing it more from the civilizational point of view, but he is doing good research, very solid, credible research, which will pass muster in any university. The problem with whatever good work is being done by RSS and other organizations is it is not academically of a very high standard.
Yeah.
So we need good qualified academics to work on this and rescue our history from the colonial dustbins. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So history needs to be rewritten for sure. And now we will move to our next question. So PK Majumdar has something to say. May I request General Bakshi to say few words about the Moni Baba who expired few years ago, and lot of Bengali books, letters, etc. were found in his possession.
Oh, you are talking of Gumnami Baba.
Yeah, I think he is referring to Gumnami Baba.
Gumnami.
He said,
Gumnami Baba.
Hmm.
Well, there are a lot of adherents to that theory. My very dear friend, what's his name, Dhar, and
Anuj Dhar.
Chandrachud, they have been working a lot on this theory. Unfortunately, I personally have I can't agree to this theory. Being a military man, Netaji, we agree that he had reached Russia. They also agree that he had reached Russia. Now, escaping from Russia, where Stalin had ultimately put him in prison, initially he was welcomed. Initially, he made 3 radio broadcasts. One was in November 1945. Sorry, December 1945. Second was in January 1946. Third was in 18th February 1946, the day the revolt took place in the Indian Navy. That is the day the British had gone crying to the Russians, to Stalin. He said, ye to Hitler ke saath tha, and put him in jail. And Stalin, he hated Hitler. So they showed him photographs of Netaji with Hitler, and he had him put in Siberian jail. Anybody to escape from Siberian jail, impossible. Minus 40 degrees centigrade. You can't survive off the land unless you have some people to help you. Whom did he have to help him in Soviet Union, Siberia. From there to escape to China, North China, from North China to come to Tibet, and from Tibet to come to India and to Uttar Pradesh. It's not easy. It's not easy. And the Justice Mukherjee Commission said their DNA doesn't match, handwriting doesn't match, etc., etc. So, of course, the others are saying, no, we question the government of India and this and that. So I have my doubts because you see, there was once a not a Gumnami Baba, a Shaulmani Baba in 1950s who was set up ki I am Netaji. And all the people who collected around him were the British Intelligence Bureau agents who had been telling Netaji, they made a big gang around there, Netaji aage, Netaji aage. Because the British were very keen, the Intelligence Bureau was keen at that time to take away the anger of the Indian people. What happened to Netaji? Kya kiya Netaji ke saath? The thing is that they had him murdered in Siberia. So I personally am not much inclined to believe the Gumnami Baba thesis. But then I keep an open mind in there is proof positive. Show me the proof. Show me the proof. You see, just explain to me how he escaped from Siberia to North China to Tibet to India. How did he escape that distance given his state of health? Don't forget he had contracted tuberculosis in the Mandalay jail where the British treated him atrociously. He was kept in such filthy conditions that he contracted tuberculosis. He had to go for treatment to Europe. So with that, lung problem, surviving minus 40 degrees centigrade of Siberia and escaping to India from the military point of view seems very difficult, if not impossible. Thank you.
Okay, so does anyone has any questions left? Okay, Deji has a question.
Last question, huh?
Sure. Okay, this will be the last question. So Deji, kindly ask your question. Kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah, there. Yeah. So the first of all, definitely the whole session was very good, and I really don't have a question. I really have a statement. Like all the things are so true, and so like kind of new recently for a lot. But listening directly from Sir General Bakshi Sahab, आपके मुंह से सुनकर और almost kind of meeting you just made my day. Feel so proud from my army family. So that's all. I really feel so proud today to sit and kind of see you and talk almost directly to you. Total salutes to you, and the way you come on the TV's discussions, and when you talk and put the things, really you definitely motivate, and youngsters are listening to you, sir. Believe me, youngsters are listening to you. And change has come anyway with last for 10 years anyway, we know that. So obviously the real freedom we have found just in 2014. So धीरे धीरे चीजें ठीक होंगी और जरूर होंगी. So I really appreciate and feel proud to be part of this session. Only one thing in your discussion, I found that you mentioned twice INA 1 and then INA 2. I never had heard that way explanation, but the way you explained, then I could see when INA 2 really became active. What years or time period was that?
The INA 1, you see, is somewhere in 41 that the Indian Independence League had gotten in touch with the Major Fujiwara and the Japanese, F. Kikan. They had gotten in touch with Gyani Zail Singh. I have been to Thailand. Actually, if you want to trace that part of the history, do go to Thailand. They held a heritage tourism for Netaji and INA. And there is one Sikh gentleman, Sardar Chawla Sahab, whose family was very closely associated with Netaji when he went to Thailand. And there they had contacted the Indian prisoners of war and taken them over. And then Mohan Singh's INA if you might like to call it. That was the first INA raised by the Japanese. But then I told you that in between there was a break between the Indians and the Japanese, and they
yes.
arrested Mohan Singh, General Mohan Singh Bawa,
Yes.
and they disbanded some units of the INA, etc. There was some major problems, etc., which all got resolved when Netaji took charge of the INA. Netaji took charge of the INA, and I have told you the changes he made and how he made a demoralized organization into a very strong, very proactive organization that really helped us to get us free.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Indu Deji, for your kind words. And so we are running out of time, so we need to terminate the
So
session.
I would just in the end, sorry, I'd just like
Yeah.
to say in the end, the Hindustan Republican Army must make it its sacred objective to try
Yes.
and get a war memorial for the INA martyrs
Martin.
on
Yes.
Rajpath stroke Kartavya Path. We
For sure,
must
for
all put our energies, go on to social
Yes.
media, start social media campaigns, signature campaigns, but we must get that. We must
For
get
sure, we
that
have
war
noted
memorial.
this, and
Thank
we
you.
will surely drive the
Yes.
campaign. And
Yes.
Thank
thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Bakshi sir, for
Thank you.
coming here. And you have been brilliant today, and you answered many of the questions, and you have enlightened us. And also, I would like to thank our audience for patiently listening. And thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Bakshi sir. We will meet again for sure,
Sure.
and we
Yes.
will again, we will keep up the campaign for the
Thank
war
you.
memorial. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
God bless.
Thank you.
For the time.
Jai
Jai
Bharat.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
Jai
Jai
Hind.
Bharat. Jai.